Welcome to A Fine Time, The Nanny Revisited. This is a podcast about The Nanny, where we recap each episode and then discuss, sharing our own unique take on each episode. I'm Bernadette.
And I'm Debbie. Today we're talking about episode 85, The Car Show. As usual, we'll start with a brief summary of the episode. Maggie is turning 17 and recognizing that her father is not going to buy her a car, she's found a way to win one by having Fran enter the Miss Trans Am contest. Fran and Maggie hoodwink Maxwell into teaching Fran how to drive stick so she can participate, but that ends in disaster when she accidentally hits an innocent rabbit. Fran leads the Miss Trans Am contest until she gets to the driving competition and loses her composure when she sees a lucky rabbit's foot hanging from the rearview mirror. Fran is disappointed in her failure. Meanwhile, Maxwell and Cece plan a benefit for Broadway Cares at Barbara Streisand's house, with Barbara's sister, Rosalind Kynes, singing. Going to the benefit is the only thing that piques Fran's interest and improves her spirits. However, en route to the benefit, Maxwell claims not to feel well, forcing Fran to take the wheel. When Fran learns that Maxwell faked being nauseous to get her back on the proverbial horse, she is very touched, and then offended when he doubles down on taking back the thing. In the end, Fran and Maxwell head back to Barbara's house after she called demanding the return of her belongings that Fran snuck out of her home. Bernadette, do you want to add anything?
Nope, I don't.
All right, would you like to take us to scene 1 in the living room?
Yeah, so we open up in the living room near the piano, and Maxwell is standing there with Cece, along with who we learn is Rosalind Kind. I didn't know who she was, sorry. But she's singing You're the Light of Love. So I'm glad then the dialogue after she's finished singing is Maxwell saying, "Bravo, bravo, this benefit will make a fortune for Broadway Cares." And Cece says, "Rosalind Kind singing and Sister Barbara Streisand hosting the event, which is not why we hired you."
Clearly.
So I appreciate Cece like very clearly informing me who we have. And then, though, after Cece says this, Rosalind Kind says, well, she hasn't really gotten around to calling Barbara yet. And of course, Max and Cece immediately simultaneously go, why? And Rosalind explains, well, she hasn't given me her new number, but I do a great impersonation of Barbara. Although personally, I think for years, she has been doing me.
Right.
And then she starts singing another song. And we cut to Fran walking in the hallway next to the living room, and she starts looking around because she hears it. And she's like, Barbara, Barbara. And she tries the double doors leading into the living room, but they're locked. So she runs around, and we see her running past the double glass paned doors behind the piano. Like she kind of tries, like looks in, and she can't get in that way. So the next thing we know, we hear the doorbell ringing, and Niles goes and answers it. And there is Fran, and she rushes in. And, Rosalind kind of like, because she's like, Barbara, Barbara. And Rosalind kind of like, I'm Barbara's sister. And Fran's like, close to the same DNA. And she starts to kiss her feet.
Correct.
And Cece like goes and grabs Fran. It's like, Nanny, fine. You're drooling on Rosalind's shoe. And Rosalind's like, it doesn't matter. They're my sisters.
Yep.
And Fran demands, take them off. Take them off. And of course, Cece's like, Nanny, fine. And Rosalind kind of sidles up to Maxwell and kind of whispers, like, this nut isn't working with us, is she? And Maxwell's like, oh, good heavens. No, no, no. She takes care of my children. And Rosalind kind of gets a look on her face.
Right.
And then so Cece suggests that they all go instead to Maxwell's office. And Fran walks along with them like, oh, yeah. Like, it's more intimate. It's got the little couch and everything. And then as soon as Cece and Maxwell walk through the double doors, Fran, like, closes it, turns around, and says to Rosalind, tell me where Barbara is or lives and no one gets hurt. Right. And that's the scene.
Right.
So we don't see her response to that. It's just the threat. And then we cut to the opening credits. So do you have anything to add to that?
The only thing I want to note is as Rosalind is singing, there's an accompanist on the piano.
Uh-huh.
And did you pay any attention to him?
Like, I knew that he was there. I did not pay particular attention.
Yeah, and I don't think you're supposed to, but he caught my attention in that, like, while, Rosalind is talking to Max and Cece, he just sits there and stares straight ahead and like adjusts the music and whatever. And like, as everyone's going into the office, he continues to just sit there.
Oh,
It just felt sort of unnatural that he
yeah.
didn't go with them or didn't get up to get a
Mhm.
glass of water. He just sat there and like stared straight ahead.
Yeah.
Sorry,
Interesting.
it caught my attention because I was like, never noticed him before.
Yeah.
So we don't see how Maxwell and Cece rescue Rosalind Kind from Fran. But scene 2 opens in the little hallway in front of Maxwell's office. The door is closed and Fran is on the outside and she's holding a phone. And Brighton comes up and greets her and she says, "Shh, my mother can't hear Barbara Streisand's sister." And then she says into the phone, "Well, if you'd stop chewing." And she like rolls her eyes and hangs up. And Brighton's like, "I need to talk to you about a personal problem." And Fran's like, "Honey, you're at that age. You should be talking to your butler." And like, she's still trying to like eavesdrop on the conversation. Then she realizes, oh, wait a minute, it's fine. Your father's telling his Pirates of Penzance story. What's up? And so Brighton says to her, "Well, I really like this girl, Julie, but she just wants to be friends. How can I get her to make a deeper commitment?" And Fran looks at him incredulous. "You're asking me?" And, he walks away and Fran walks into the living room. She's apparently given up listening, eavesdropping at the door. And Maggie greets her and says that she's had it, that Dad is obviously not going to get her a car for her birthday, but she's figured out a way to win one. And she hands Fran a brochure and Fran looks at it. "Miss Trans Am, oh, honey, I'm not letting you enter some contest where you parade around some skimpy outfit so a bunch of men can stare at you like you're a piece of meat. No, ma'am." And Maggie's like, "Not me, you." And Fran's like, "Oh, how sweet," which very different reaction.
Mhm.
And so Maggie explains the contest to her, that you have to win the talent portion, drive a 5-speed Trans Am through an obstacle course, and be between the ages of 18 and 25. And Fran's like, "Oh, well, that kicks me out. I can't drive a stick shift." And
Mhm.
Maggie's like, "You can't?" She's like, "No, nobody in my family can. I think it's in the Torah or something." And Maggie's like, "Well, maybe Dad could teach you on his Porsche." "Oh, what am I saying? He would never help you win a car for me." And of course, we see Maxwell start to walk into the room. And so Fran says, "Oh, honey, oh, Maggie, I've seen your father drive his Porsche. Believe me, he's nobody to teach anybody how to drive a stick." And Maxwell's like, "I beg your pardon." And Fran says quietly to Maggie, "We're in."
Mhm.
Do you have anything you want to add?
No, just a comment of like, obviously the funny thing is like you expect Fran to say, well, we don't. It's set up as if to say, oh, it's because she doesn't qualify because she's not between 18 and 25, but she says it's because she can't drive stick shift. And again, I just think it's hilarious that they think they can get away with this because you would think a contest where you're winning a car would like verify your age with like a driver's license or something.
Yeah, but if you're Fran and you have a fake ID that says you're younger than you are,
Yeah.
that's sufficient. Not that we're encouraging people to violate the law or anything.
Yeah.
But there's yeah, I'll make a note to come back to this in future fun.
Okay. So again, Fran's right in terms of getting Maxwell on board because the next scene we are in Maxwell's Porsche and Fran is behind the wheel. Maxwell's in the the passenger seat, front passenger seat. And Maxwell's talking about, he's apparently knows about it because he's saying this entire thing is ridiculous. Maggie is far too young to have a car. And Fran notes that, I know you're a foreigner, so I cut you some slack when you wear dark socks with sandals. But in this country, when a girl turns 17, she gets herself a car. Unless you come from my neighborhood, then it's a car or a nose job. And then
Mhm.
she adds after, Maxwell looks at her, she's like, I got the car, clarifying.
Correct.
Side note, I think it's interesting they say 17 here when like the stereotype in America is 16, like your
Uh,
sweet 16.
it depends on where you live and
Okay.
like how old you have to be to qualify for a driver's license or a learner's permit.
Okay. So
I
like is New York then like 17 instead of 16?
I think so, but it's been a while. Let's see. If you were, yeah, so according to our friends at dmv.newyork.gov, I think it says if you are under age 16, you cannot drive in New York State, even if you hold a permit or license issued by another state. If you're 16 or older and hold a learner permit, junior learner permit, or junior driver's license from outside New York, you must obey restrictions, blah, blah, blah. I think New York is you have to be 17.
Interesting. Then
That's
you
what I
should have said in New York because growing up in the South, you get your learner's permit at 15 and then your driver's license at 16. And yeah. And so like in where I grew up, the stereotype was when you're 16.
interesting.
Why it's also sweet 16. You get a car. I did not, but but yeah.
So sorry, just because I'm now finding this super interesting.
Yeah.
I mean, I didn't get my driver's license until I was no longer a teenager. So,
Oh, okay.
um,
I didn't know that. Huh.
yeah, I was a late bloomer. I didn't need it. But what's interesting, so according to the same page on dmv.newyork.gov, driving privileges vary depending on what geographic region of New York someone is driving in.
Oh,
So
really?
um so like upstate New York City, and Long Island. And so yeah, it's just really interesting. And then they also talk about there's a junior learner permit and a junior driver's license. And that there are different restrictions based on what you have. Anyway, for anyone who is still a teenager or someone who is not a teenager, just interested in the driving laws of New York, dmv.newyork.gov is a great resource.
Yeah. Yeah, that is interesting because, yeah, I feel like the South is generally younger than, and part of that too may be, again, we don't have the public transit that like New York City does. So, like to get to a place, you kind of need a car. But anyway,
Right, that's the difference.
but wait, so quick side note once again, but did you grow up with the phrase Sweet 16 or no?
With the what, Sweet 16?
The phrase
Oh,
Sweet
yeah.
16.
Yeah, I've heard the phrase. I was not invited to any.
Yeah. So then, like, I guess if it's not that you're finally able to drive a car, uh,
What's the point?
yeah, like why, like how is it used in your region?
Isn't it just a big party, kind of like what Maggie had in the episode of Fine Family Feud?
Well, yeah, I guess in our my area, it was also associated kind of with the fact that, like I said, you can now get a driver's license. You can, like it's kind of a milestone. But
Mhm.
anyway, sorry, that was a side tangent. Back to the scene.
Sorry.
Maxwell is like, well, why don't you just get her a Remington Steel lady chic thing you get everyone else, And she's like, are you kidding? She's like a daughter to me. Besides, you always get her something expensive. Now I can. And Maxwell's like, oh, Miss Fine, what you give my children, you can't put a price on. And Fran's like, and yet you find $6 an hour sufficient. And it's like,
Mhm.
again, looking back from 2023 lens, $6 an hour.
Yeah, exactly.
Um, so Maxwell, then they get back to he's teaching her. So he reminds her, go into third. You've got to feel it when it's time to shift. Do I have to squeeze your leg every time? And obviously, Fran gets this look on her face, that she's purposefully doing this. And she's like, I guess I'm a slow learner. And then she continues driving, and Maxwell's, there you go. That's the way. And then Fran's like, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God. And she's like very much distracted. And Maxwell's like, what? And she's like, Loman's warehouse, the mothership. And Maxwell prevents her from driving off to Loman's. And then she's like, okay, no more distractions. I'm shifting. And then the car phone rings. Yes,
Mhm.
a car phone.
Uh-huh.
And so at first, like Fran answers it, but then obviously Maxwell doesn't want her distracted. He wants her to have both hands on the wheel. So it's Cece, and he informs her that she's on speaker. And Cece starts out by saying, Maxwell, great news. Barbara Streisand called. And Maxwell's like, I'm putting you back, like I'm taking you off. And Fran's like, you touch that button and I'll kill us both, which is dramatic.
Oh, very.
So again, Cece stays on speaker, and Maxwell informed her she is on speaker. And Cece says, Barbara Streisand has agreed, to host the event as long as it's at her house in the Hamptons. And Fran's like, oh my God, I can't believe I'm going to Barbara's house. And Max was like, no, you're not. And Fran does not hear him. She just keeps going. This is the most exciting day of my life. And Max was like, no, it's not. And Fran's like, oh, Mr. Sheffield, how can I ever thank you? And Max was like, by looking that way, look out. And then we heard the tires screech. Oh my God, I think I hit something. And Max was like, oh, no, it was just a piece of rubbish. And she's like, with bunny ears and a cotton tail.
Mm-hmm.
And Maxwell again is trying to make it so that she doesn't, realize. But Cece's like, no. I know that sound. Nanny Fine killed a widow Wesky Wabbit.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, that's the scene. Do you have
That
anything to add?
I do not.
Okay, well, take us to the kitchen.
So scene 4 opens with, Fran and Maxwell walking in the side door in the kitchen, and Fran's like, I can't believe I killed an innocent rabbit. And Cece's there, and she's like, oh, Nanny, fine, you must feel horrible. And Fran's like, I do. And Cece's like, you know what you need? Some comfort food. And she pulls out from behind her back a box of Trix cereal with the Trix rabbit.
Mm-hmm.
And Fran just looks heartbroken, and Maxwell still is trying to console her. Miss Fine, it's not your fault. Sometimes horrible accidents happen. And Niles chimes in, gesturing to Cece, Exhibit A. And Maxwell says, you really shouldn't feel so bad. It's not as if rabbits are an endangered species. They spend their entire lives mating and reproducing. And Fran's like, oh, great. Not only did I kill an animal, but I killed one with a better social life than mine.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just going to interject, just because rabbits are not an endangered species does not make it okay to kill them. That's my opinion. I will continue. Maxwell still tries to make Fran feel better. Miss Fine, you have to move on with your life. Now let me ask you, what would Barbara do if she killed an animal? And Fran pauses a moment. Well, first, she'd fire her chauffeur. And then she'd write a beautiful ballad about it. Marvin Hamlish would arrange. And then she'd do the duet with Julio Iglesias, to pick up the foreign market. I feel better. And Max is like, that a girl. And she's like, you know what? I'm going to win this Miss Trans Am contest and make my platform animal rights. I'm going to speak out for all the little creatures that no one cares about. And again, Niles gestures to Cece, Exhibit B.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have anything you want to add?
Nope.
All right, take us to the Coliseum.
Yes, so we're now in the Nassau. I just
Nassau?
said that really weird. Yeah, Nassau
Coliseum.
Coliseum. And Fran is there along with Brighton and Maggie. And Fran says, B, you didn't have to come with us. And Brighton's like, hey, I love cars, as he very obviously ogles to scantily clad women, right? And
Correct. So
it's just Fran and Maggie left, and Maggie's like, shouldn't you be getting ready? We don't have time to meet Miss America. And Fran's like, honey, I was Miss Subways. It's a professional courtesy. Oh, if word got out that I was here and I snubbed her, that could lead to inter-pageantry incident. So they end up going up and meeting Miss America, who at the time was Tara? Question mark.
Yeah.
And Fran introduces herself as Miss Subway's 1980-90.
Mm-hmm.
And so Miss America's like, "Oh, what was your platform?" And Fran's like, 59 and Lex. Um, Lexington or Lex?
Lex,
Okay, Lex.
which is abbreviated for Lexington. Yeah.
Yes. Okay. And obviously two different takes on platform, right? Despite Fran
Correct.
in the previous scene saying her platform would be animals' rights. Anyway, but
Well,
she's
she
Miss
was saying
Subway.
her
Yes,
platform. Yeah.
yes, yeah, because she's Miss Subways. But anyway, Fran's trying to continue with the similarities. Like Miss America can't get married during her tenure, and I can't get married to save my life.
For the love of God.
Yeah, and anyway, then Miss America asks, "Oh, like, are you here for the Miss Trims? Like to win the contest? Oh yeah, like how could you tell? Like it's obvious." But she's talking to Maggie, and Maggie's like, "No, no, no, it's Fran." And Miss America kind of like, "Oh, good luck to you." Like very disbelieving.
Yeah.
I think,
Dismissive, I'd say.
yeah, and so like as they walk away, Fran's like, "Meanwhile, I voted for Miss Kentucky."
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Anything you'd like to add?
No.
Okay.
So in scene 6, we get to see a little bit of the competition. It's a very short scene. We hear the announcer saying that moving into our final round, the driving competition, and our current leader, Fran Fine, and they like pull back the curtains and Fran walks out, and I think she's in her swimsuit.
Mhm. Not the
And
one that she was gonna take though to tattoo though in episode 10.
no, she has multiple bathing suits apparently in multiple colors.
Mhm.
Um, we cut quickly to Maxwell talking to Niles. So sexist. What do women in swimsuits have to do with selling cars? And Niles is like, "Sir, I think we've produced one too many revivals of Mame." And we cut back to Fran, who's now, getting into the car. "Miss Fine, start your engine." And as she like gets herself settled, she sees a yellow rabbit's foot hanging from the rear view mirror, and she loses it.
Mhm. Yeah. Like full on screams, like as if she's in an old fashioned horror movie.
Yeah, I mean, she's clearly traumatized,
Mhm.
understandably so.
Yep.
Would you like
So
to take us to the living room?
yeah, so we are now in the living room. Fran's on the couch flipping through a magazine. Maggie walks in behind her and she's like, "Oh, Fran, don't feel bad about not winning me a car. I just, love my new wet dry lady chic."
Mm-hmm.
And she's like, Fran's like, "Oh, you don't have to, it's so sweet." Um, and Maggie's like, "No, no, I really like it." And she like holds up her arm so that she shows how smooth her armpit is.
Right.
And again, Fran's like, "Oh, you're so sweet. I'm sure, but weren't your friends disappointed?" And Maggie's like, "I don't have any friends anymore," which is again dramatic. But she, I think, leaves kind of at that point, and Maxwell walks in, and he's telling Fran, they should go for a drive. When you fall off the horse, you need to get back on. And Fran's like, "No, I'm Jewish. The closest I get to a horse is polo at Ralph Lauren." And then Maxwell's like, again, trying to get her out and about. What if we go to Parasmus, Paramus,
Erasmus.
Parasmus Mall? We'll tear off the buttons so we
Aramis.
can
Wow, we're both
Paramus.
screwing up.
Okay,
Aramis.
Paramus. Okay, we can go and can tear buttons off to get an extra 10% off. And she's like, "No, I can't." And he's like, "But like what?" And she's like, "I'm barred from Paramus." So she continues, instead she's decided to get therapy. Gracie walks in at that time. It's obvious that Gracie is Fran's therapist. And she informs Fran that she has to cancel their appointment because she has a date coming over. And of course, Fran makes a comment, have like therapists just create even more resentment or bitterness to keep you coming back. So Gracie's out and Cece walks in, and Cece, being Cece, can't resist but to whistle the bunny hop as she's going by. And she even says out loud, hop, 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 as she hop, hop, hops.
Mm-hmm.
And Maxwell's still trying to kind of cajole, Fran and to get her out of her, mood, and says, can't you just forget it and get on with life? And Fran's like, well, if you're gonna, cuddle, because at this point he's like kind of hugging her and stuff like that. She's like, well, if you're gonna cuddle and touch me every time I'm depressed, I gotta tell you, I'm pretty much in this mood for a while.
Mm-hmm.
And at that point, like Niles walks in, and Niles, because like Maxwell wants to know anything he can do to kind of get Fran out of this mood. And Niles suggests, how about going to Barbara Streisand's house? And as Maxwell still has his arms around Fran, he like grabs Niles and pulls him over. And he's like, pack your bags and get out.
Mm-hmm.
Because of course Fran loves the idea of going to Barbara Streisand's house. And now,
Right.
Maxwell has agreed to it because he'd do anything for her.
Uh-huh.
Do you have anything to add?
I do not.
Okay. Can you take us to the car?
Sure. So we're back in the Porsche, and this time Fran is not driving, but Maxwell is, and Cece's in the front seat with him, and Fran's in the back, and she's trying to figure out what to say when she meets Barbara Streisand. And she comes up with a couple different attempts. Oh, it's a pleasure to meet you, Miss Streisand. Oh no, that's way too formal. Nice knowing you, Babs. No, that's too familiar. Ugh, I got such a stuck in my Gadarum. Oh, you know what? That's perfect. And Cece's like, this is going to be a disaster. First, we had to shake 3 busloads of fines trailing us. And Maxwell cuts her off. Oh, come on, Cece, leave Miss Fine alone. This is a very important night for her. And he turns his attention to her. Miss Fine, your hair is looking particularly big tonight. And she says, well, yours would too if you had a camcorder hidden in it. I'm kidding. Would you relax? I'm not going to embarrass you. I'm on a pilgrimage to meet my spiritual leader. And around this time, Maxwell starts complaining that, oh, my stomach is killing me. It must be that pate Niles made. And Fran's like, well, we're going to Barbara's house. She's a sister. She'll have Tagament and Mylanta and Pepsid AC. Don't worry. And he's like, I'm serious, Miss Fine. I'm sweaty. I'm starting to shake. I'm going to have to pull over. And she's like, yeah, you'll pull over into her driveway. Now floor it. And, Maxwell says to Cece that, well, you're going to have to drive. And she's like, and Fran's like, oh, that's a good idea. Cece, you drive. Don't even stop the car. Just switch. And Cece's like, Maxwell, I can't drive a stick. And he's like, oh, it's no good. I got to get out. I have to get some air. And so, he pulls over, he opens the door, starts to get out. And Fran's like, no, we'll drive with the windows open. So it's little Dewey. I'll frizz for my queen. And so he's gotten out, and Fran's going to chase after him. And Cece grabs her by the arm and pulls her into the driver's seat. Nanny, fine. You can drive a stick. And she's like, no, I can't. I know. You'll put it in neutral. I'll push. I shoved my mother up a hill in San Francisco once. This is just a small foreign car. And Cece explains to her that Maxwell and I are producing this for Broadway Cares. And I don't care if Broadway cares if I'm not there to get the credit. And Fran keeps refusing. I can't. And Cece starts trying to sing some songs for her. And Fran starts to get upset. I'm not going to see my Barbara. Oh my God, forgive me. And Cece pulls the last page out of the book. Nanny, fine. Roz swore me to secrecy, but James Brolin is going to propose to Barbara tonight. You'll know before Mary Hart. Well, that was enough. Fran shouts at Maxwell, get in. You'll puke in the Porsche.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have anything you want to add, Bernadette?
Nope.
All right. Would you like to take us to scene 9?
Yes. So we are now in the kitchen. Obviously, we don't get to see, unfortunately, any of the party. This is the aftermath. Fran is in the kitchen with Niles. They're at the table kind of drinking coffee, and eating and chatting. And Niles is like, "So, what was she like? Did you actually get to talk to Miss Streisand?" And Friend's like, "Uh-huh. I told her, 'I love you, my queen.' And she said, 'Put those boots back in my closet.'"
Mhm.
And so Niles is saying, "It was a banner night for both of us. You got to meet your idol and overcome your fear of driving, while I got a safety pin and worked that little thread through Mr. Um, why am I
Sheffield's.
blanking? Yep. I was like, why am I blanking? Mr. Sheffield's sweatpants. And Fran's like goes on, and I have you, Niles, to thank for getting me over that fear. If he hadn't given Mr. Sheffield that rancid pate, he wouldn't have gotten sick, etc. And Niles is like, I'm highly offended. And she's like, why? Because I called your pate rancid? And he's like, no, that you thought I would make it. I buy it, peel off the label, and slap it on a plate. I haven't even done that in months. And Fran's like, she gets contemplative. She's like, why would he say he got sick? Why would he fake it? Oh, that sweet man. You know what he did for me? And Niles is like, threw up on Miss Babcock? No, that would have been for me. And Fran's like, no, he pretended to, be sick to force her to drive. And she goes on to say, oh, he was showing his love for me by acting like he was nauseous, which is like not the most complimentary, but she's
Mm-mm.
she's still loving it. And she's like, "Did you know how he felt about me?" And Naz is like, "Did I know? For 4 years, I've been hinting to him, I've been hinting to you, I've been hinting to him to hint to you. Why do you think I don't have enough time to make pate?" That is
Exactly.
the scene. Do you have anything to add to that?
I just want to comment on Niall's delivery of that last line. It was so perfect.
Mm-hmm.
Um, all right. So in our next scene, we find Maxwell alone in his office, and Fran comes in. Mr. Sheffield, I know what you did. And he's like, oh, well, Miss Fine, James and Barbara insisted we go out for a drink. I couldn't find you. And she's like, I'm not talking about that. What? And he's like, gotcha. Let's get back to what you were talking about. She's like, of course, come in, and she's getting ready to she sits on his desk. And she's like, I know that you pretended to be sick to get me to drive. I'll tell you, it's just so adorable how you can't really express the way you feel. Like all the times you yell and scream at me, when in reality, you want to hug me. And he smiles and says, well, and she continues, and all those times that you fired me, in reality, you want to kiss me. And he's like, all right. And then she's like, when you told me you loved me and you took it back, when in reality, gets cut off by him. No, actually, that I meant. And she says, I hate you. He's like,
Mm-hmm.
no, you don't. You really want to hug me. And she's like, okay, I'm busted. And she jumps down from his desk and they hug.
Mm-hmm.
And as they're hugging, he says, tell me, Miss Fine, out of curiosity, how did you know I was faking? And she says, oh, Niles spilled the beans. And of course, poor Niles walks in, and Maxwell gestures, come over here. And Niles shakes his head, and Maxwell points at the desk, violently. And Niles keeps shaking his head. And Fran's just still hugging Maxwell and rubbing her hands over him and through his hair and whatnot. And Maxwell finally just like dismisses Niles with his hand so he can enjoy hugging Miss Fine.
Mm-hmm.
Do
Yep.
you have anything you want to add?
Nope.
All right. Would you like to take us back to the living room slash
Yeah. So
waiting?
Maxwell and Fran are walking down the stairs, and Maxwell's saying to Fran, now, I'm just saying, I'm surprised that Barbara Streisand called you out of the blue and invited you back to her house." And Fran's like, "What don't you get? We share the same heritage. We both have distinctive voices. I have an Andre Agassi poster in my room. She had Andre Agassi." And Maxwell just keeps going, like, very bizarre. Like, she's a very private person. And he walks out, and she's just like, "Oh, let me get my purse." So she goes back in, she gets the purse, she pulls out like a boot, a shoe,
Mm-hmm.
and she's like, "Goodbye, gorgeous." And then as she's walking, she's like, "I suppose she'll want the purse back too." And then she leaves. So obviously Barbara was calling to get her stuff back, not because she just wanted a social call with Fran Fine.
Correct. But did you catch what she said to the shoe?
The goodbye, gorgeous.
Uh-huh. Goodbye, gorgeous.
Mm-hmm.
All right. That's all I wanted to
Yep.
add.
Yep.
And that's pretty much the episode. The credit scene is just like bloopers.
Mm-hmm.
Which I
But
don't. Oh, go
yeah,
ahead.
well, so like the first one, the actress who plays Maggie kind of messes up her line, and Fran makes a comment about how she's in like 2 movies of the week or something. She's overworked.
Mhm.
Um, and then the second blooper is when they're in the car and Fran's explaining in her neighborhood, you either got a car or a nose job, but she accidentally says she got a nose job in the scene. And like the actor who plays Maxwell is just laughing.
Mhm.
And that's the episode.
Right. Is there anything you want to talk about before we hop into our shticks?
Not particularly. What about you?
Nope.
Okay. So favorite fashion. Did you have any favorite fashion this episode?
So I'd say that this week we had limited choices.
Mm-hmm.
Of what we saw, my favorite outfit was the one that Fran was wearing in the last scene in the office. It's like a neon green skirt, and then the top is like a also neon green, but with a black mesh over it. Of the outfits we see, that's my favorite. My least favorite outfit is what Fran is in most of the episode, which is the like purple suit with the like red shirt and the red headband.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't really care for that. But
Yeah.
that's just me. How about you?
Yeah, I would say, again, I don't necessarily have a favorite, but if I had to choose, I think I'd like most her houndstooth like um outfit that she's wearing in the very last scene
Mm-hmm.
when they're going back to Barbara. And I agree, I did not care for that purple suit and red shirt combo, which
I mean,
again, like you said, is for the most of the episode, which also like, yeah, a
doesn't
lot
really make a lot of
happened then
sense.
in
Yeah.
one day.
Yeah. It seems sort of like Fran would have been wearing the purple and red, when she meets Rosalind, when she's eavesdropping, and that first conversation with Maxwell, and then they would have been driving a different day. So she would have been wearing
Mhm.
something else.
Yeah.
But
Yeah. Okay. Any other fashion you wanted to talk about?
no. There were limited
Mhm.
choices. I mean, the only other notable thing I think she wore was the bathing suit in the Miss Trans Am contest, but
And it was like, just in case our listeners haven't seen it in a while, like it was a more modest cut, I would say, than some
it
of the
was.
other contestants.
It's
Like it was
also
fuller
more,
in the bust area.
yeah, it's like elongated is the
Yeah.
way I'd put it. And also it's more conservative than other bathing suits we've seen her not just purchased for the purposes of seducing Maxwell, but we've seen her in a bathing suit before, like on
hmm
Ship of France, and that was a black and white bathing suit that was shall we say skimpier.
hmm
So
Yep. Okay. Shall we move on to notable New Yorkers?
there were a bunch this week.
Yeah. Again, straight off the bat is Rosalind Kind.
Right. Who, according to RosalindKind.com, is and I quote, dynamic, multi-talented entertainer who has forged a successful career in all facets of entertainment, from critically acclaimed recordings to sold-out performances on Broadway and in top concert venues and nightclubs the world over.
And obviously, Barbara Streisand for the umpteenth time in this series.
Yeah. So because we've talked about Barbara so many times, we usually don't describe her, but I did pull together a brief bio. She's an American actress, singer, and director whose career has spanned over 60 years. Billboard has named her the top female Jewish musician of all time. And that's according to our friends at Wikipedia. She's Jewish, in case that was not obvious.
Were you able to identify the various songs that are being sung? Like, because Rosalind Kind sings two just in the opening.
Yeah, so the first one is You're the Light of Love, which is a song by Rosalind Kind. According to her website, it's a song that reflects a period of her life where she was doing a lot of self-searching. Again, that's according to her website, rosalindkind.com. I mistakenly assumed that when she picked up, that was the same song, but I don't think that's accurate. The only reference I could find to that was to an article about Rosalind Kind, so it's another song of hers. Yeah, those are the two songs in the first scene.
Okay. Then there's a reference to Pirates of Penzance,
which is a comedic opera that apparently premiered in New York City in December 1879.
Wow.
Yeah, unless there's a different Pirates of Penzance, which is also possible, but seems unlikely. It tells the story of a young man who was born on February 29th, meaning that his birthday comes only once every 4 years. And so he was supposed to be released from an apprenticeship on his 21st birthday. And so he learns that because his birthday only comes every 4 years, he must continue for another 63 years in his apprenticeship. And the woman who he promptly fell in love with agrees to wait for him.
Oh, wow.
That seems like a really long time, and also like a really weird technicality to get caught up in.
Yeah. Well, like, I think back in college I saw a production of it, but I totally don't have the plot remembered.
I was gonna say, did my summary sound at all right? But I guess you can't.
I don't recall. I think too they like modernize some references each time. I could be wrong, but
I would
anyway.
hope so. I mean, for a comedic opera that began running in 1879, I'm pretty sure those references would be more dated than the references we talk about from the 1990s.
Exactly. Now, I tried to do a quick search about a Miss Trans Am contest. I don't know if that exists necessarily, but did you find something?
I didn't look specifically for that, but I looked for Trans Am and frankly got a little confused.
Okay.
So it's an American racing series that started in 1966, but it seemed to talk about like the history and how it's changed, but I'm still not entirely sure what it is. I think it's a type of car.
Yeah, but I'm not a car person. I assume
me neither. So anyway.
Yeah.
Lovely listeners, let us know.
Yeah. Porsche.
That is a very fancy, very expensive type of car.
Yes. Now, I guess the show Remington Steele, which I think we've talked about before, had a lady Schick?
Yeah, so we did talk about Remington Steele, but for those who don't recall, it was an American crime show featuring Pierce Brosnan that aired from 1982 until 1987. That's according to our friends at Wikipedia. When I tried searching for Remington Steele, Lady Schick, I keep wanting to say Schick, but
I know.
different.
That's my problem too.
I found an eBay posting for a Remington Princess, which looks like it was a shaving apparatus from the 1960s, I think. And that was, again, an eBay posting.
Because Schick is a type of like razor. And obviously, Maggie later uses it, but I just wasn't sure about how that connected to Remington Steele. So I assume maybe they used it product placement during an episode. I don't know.
I think it must be the Remington Princess, which was a line of them.
Hmm.
I think. But again, it would have predated this episode by decades. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. So I don't know.
Lovely listeners, let us know if you know.
Hmm. Yep. Um, I don't know if you talked about the Hamptons or not.
It's the eastern end of Long Island.
Yeah. Trick cereal.
It's a breakfast cereal that's made by General Mills, which features, and I quote, fruit flavored sweetened ground corn pieces, end quote. Its spokesperson has been a rabbit since 1955, according to our friends at Wikipedia.
We have another reference to Marvin Hamlish, who was previously in an episode.
He was, for those who don't recall, he's an American composer and conductor who's won a Tony, an Emmy, a Grammy, an Oscar, and a Pulitzer Prize. He unfortunately died in 2012. That's according to our friends at Wikipedia.
Hmm. Julio Iglesias.
He's considered the most successful Spanish singer in the world. He's a singer, songwriter, and soccer player, or as they put it, footballer, according to our friends at Wikipedia.
Hmm. I don't know if you had anything about the Nassau. No, I can't
Nassau
say it.
Coliseum. I do. The Nassau Coliseum's full name is the Nassau Veteran Memorial Coliseum. It originally opened in 1972 with a basketball game played by the New York Nets. It closed in the mid 2010s for an extensive renovation before reopening in 2017. And that's according to our friends at, I want to say Nassau Coliseum. Yeah, NassauColiseum.com. I was right.
There you go. Okay. I'm assuming Miss Subways is made up.
No,
It's
it's not.
not.
No.
Wow.
So Miss Subways was the title given to a New York City woman. Frankly, the Wikipedia page was a little bit sparse, but it's a title that was given to individual women in New York City between 1941 and 1976. And for those who had the title, their image and a brief bio would appear on posters in the subways.
So that even predates then the 1990 that
Correct.
Fran says.
Correct. But it did come
Interesting.
back. It apparently did come back for 1 year in 2014.
Oh, okay.
Just in case you were curious.
Yeah. Okay. Now because there's obviously Miss America, but like was that person Tara, the
Yep.
actual Miss America?
Oh,
Okay.
I didn't check the casting, but the Miss America in 1997 was Tara Dawn Holland,
Okay.
who was previously Miss Kansas in 1996. And that's according to our
Okay.
friends at missamerica.org. I also grabbed a short statement about what Miss America is. From their webpage, I quote, for over 100 years, the Miss America organization has been committed to empowering women to lead.
Okay. Mame.
It's a musical based in New York City that ranged from the Great Depression until World War II, and it focused on Mame. I'm not sure if she pronounces it Dennis or Denis, but an eccentric bohemian whose motto is life is a banquet and most poor sons of bitches are starving to death. That's according to our friends at Wikipedia.
Okay. Is the Paramus Mall?
Paramus
Well,
Mall.
Paramus.
It's now
I can't say it.
it's fine. When you're on the East Coast, lots of things have challenging to pronounce names.
Mhm.
But Paramus, I think it's now called Paramus Park, which looks like a fancy mall. And that's according to our friends at paramispark.com.
And right before that is Polo at Ralph Lauren.
Polo Ralph Lauren was the former name of Ralph Lauren Corporation, which we've talked about previously,
Yep.
according to our friends at Wikipedia.
So Cece whistles the bunny hop.
Yeah, you're on your own on that one because I was like, I know
Yeah,
this is a reference, but I don't know to what.
Yeah, the bunny hop is like I want to say like it's from the 1950s. A quick research. I don't know, because like I remember in 3rd grade we had 50s day and we danced to the bunny hop.
That's cute.
Yeah. Because there's a certain dance that goes with it. Like you're all like you know how like the locomotive, like you all like line up and have your hands on each other, like a kind of a line. The bunny hop, sorry, the bunny hop is similar in that like you all like kind of put your hands on like the hips of the person in front of you and you go around and there's certain like movements and stuff that you do, but you do hop, hop, hop like Cece does in the episode.
Okay.
So, yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. You've never danced the bunny hop?
I don't think so, but anything is possible.
Mm-hmm.
I don't remember elementary school as well as I probably should.
Mm-hmm. I probably remember it too well compared to like other people. I just, yeah. Anyway, so Fran, I don't know if you, because I know we talked about Mylanta before, but she just gives a litany of various like digestive medicine.
Tagamet,
Tagamet, yeah,
Mylanta, Pepsid AC. Yeah.
AC, that they're all of this a similar vein, right?
Yeah, they all deal with digestive issues, but different parts of the digestive tract, I think.
Mm-hmm. Cece sings a song. Did you identify it?
She
No?
sings, "Oh, it was all so simple then." It's a line from The Way We Were, which is by our friend Barbara Streisand.
Mm-hmm.
And that's according to our friends at lyrics.com.
Then there's a mention of James Brolin.
An American actor who's known for roles in Marcus Welby, MD, and Hotel. He married Barbara Streisand in 1998. That's according to our friends at Wikipedia.
There you go. Very timely. Mary Hart.
An American actress and TV personality who hosted Entertainment Tonight from 1982 until 2011. That's according to our friends at Wikipedia.
Mm-hmm. Let's see. Do you have anything else?
Andre Agassi.
Ah, yes.
Who we've talked about previously. He's an American tennis player. And I think that's it. Yeah,
I don't have anything else.
But there seemed to be a lot this week. So
yeah. Okay, Yiddish cop.
All right, so we're gonna start with Barbara being a sister who has all those different stomach aids. Ashkenazi Jews are at have a higher risk of things like Crohn's disease, which is apparently 2 to 4 times more prevalent in the Ashkenazim compared to non-Jewish people of non-Jewish European ancestry. Jews tend to have a lot of digestive issues, including sensitivities to gluten and dairy products and tummy troubles. And yeah, there are a bunch of websites that talk about it, but one of the ones I looked at was healthline.com. Another was like Jewish TMI. There's a lot there. The Torah is the compilation of the first 5 books of the Hebrew Bible, basically Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy. It's also known as the 5 books of Moses. So that's like, think of that as like the Jewish Bible, or it's the Old Testament. I want to talk about kissing Rosalind's shoes. There's something to me that's very peculiar about that, especially considering Purim was recently, and in the Purim story, Mordecai upsets the villain by refusing to bow or aggrandize him because he'd only bow down to God. And it just seemed to me very strange that Fran would be bowing down and kissing Rosalind's shoes. So
well, she's gonna go see her spiritual leader.
Yeah, so on that front, Barbara Streisand. So we've already talked about who Barbara Streisand is and how she's Jewish. One thing that I thought was really interesting when researching her, when she was working on Yentl, which we've talked about previously, which she starred and directed, and I think she was also a producer on. She had a lot of conversations with rabbis to make sure she got things like religiously correct. And so there were rumors swirling that she was becoming more religious. And she responded with, and I quote, "I was always a Jew. I feel I'm a good person, and that is what the Jewish tradition teaches you to be. I'm not that religious, but I'm Jewish in my soul, my heritage, my spirit." I just thought that was a really nice quote. I pulled that from our friends at jewishnews.co.uk. And then I think the last thing is when Fran's trying to figure out what to say when she meets Barbara Streisand, she ends up settling on, "I've got such a shtuch in my gedarim." I can't find a direct translation to that, but the way she's like touching her back, it sounds like she's complaining that she has a pain in like her side, her back, somewhere like the lower half of her body. And she considers that a good way to introduce herself because of, Barbara being a sister and probably having other physical complaints that they can bond over. So I think
what about her statement that she's Jewish, so the closest she gets to a horse is polo?
I have no idea.
Okay.
Because when I was a kid and we would go away for Passover, one of the activities was almost always to go on a pony ride. So,
Okay.
and that was usually with like a more conservative or Orthodox group. So I don't know. I mean, obviously they're not kosher. We don't eat them.
I don't eat horses either.
So actually I take it back. Hold on. So according to our friends at jewishcurrents.org, there's a 2018 essay by Paul Devasi, or at least I think that's who it's by, titled "The Horse in Jewish Religious Text." So it's so let's see, unlike the pig, and I'm quoting here, "Unlike the pig and the dog, which are not only forbidden as food, but are widely scorned throughout the Torah, the horse, also forbidden as food, often symbolizes great strength and courage, as well as spectacular beauty." And then this continues to discuss multiple times that horses are discussed in the Torah. And perhaps the author of this is not Paul Devasi, but A.D. Paul. It has two different authors listed. Anyway, for those who are more interested in horses in the Torah, this seems like a good source to start.
Okay.
Then did I catch everything? Did I miss anything else? Okay, thank you.
So 90s nostalgia?
Old cars.
Yes. A prominent old car in this episode.
Correct.
And it has a car phone.
Mm-hmm.
Which, again, very nostalgic. I never had one.
We didn't either.
But again, I mean, nowadays it's just your cell phone.
Do you want to share with our listeners how the car phone differed in appearance from a cell phone?
I mean, wasn't it like connected to the actual car?
Exactly. It had a cord, and it was like built into or attached to the car.
Yeah. Another thing is Fran references, quote unquote, jokingly, that her hair is so much bigger because there's a camcorder hidden in it.
Exactly.
Again, nowadays you don't need a camcorder, you just need your phone, right?
Correct. We got to see a quick cut of an old Times Square. So that looked a little dated. It looks a little bit more higher tech now. The old Nassau Coliseum. It has been remodeled. I thought the having a rabbit's foot as and I put in air quotes, good luck charm in the car, to me felt dated.
Yeah. So I guess it doesn't really qualify as 90s nostalgia, but it was but I don't know where to stick it. Um,
Here's fine.
you know, you've heard about the Streisand effect, right?
That sounds familiar, but I couldn't define it.
So it's the way in which attempts to hide, remove, or censor information can lead to the unintended consequence of increasing awareness of that information. And it's because, like, back in like 2003, Barbara Streisand tried to suppress the California Coastal Records Project from photographing her residence in Malibu. And that inadvertently drew greater attention to the photograph. So, like, it became known as the Streisand effect. And I just think it's very interesting how in this episode, Maxwell's like, oh, she's a very private person. Like, why would she, invite you to her house and all that kind of stuff. So
Mhm.
again, not doesn't quite fit here, but I was just like thinking of the irony of the Streisand effect.
That's interesting. Thank you.
Yeah. Um, so again, I know pageants still exist, but I it still feels a bit dated. I don't know. I don't know how you feel about that.
Yeah, I kind of agree. It felt a little dated, but you're right, pageants do still exist.
Hmm.
So
Yeah, it's like I don't know. Um, again, do you have anything?
the only other one I want to add is the cordless phone that Fran
Mhm.
tried to help her mom eavesdrop
Oh yeah. Hmm.
with. And I will point out, I don't know where else to stick this, but as you may recall, I think it was season 1 where we had the episode, or maybe it was season 2. The where we oh yeah, it was season 1, Ode to Barbara Joan, where Cece's dad was going to take Fran to the Barbara Streisand concert.
Hmm.
But ends up taking Cece. At the very end, we have Fran and her mother sitting in the living room with the phone between them, listening to the concert on the
Hmm.
cordless phone. I just want to point that out, that like it's sort of funny that like she's listened to Barbara perform, now she's listening to Barbara's sister
Hmm.
using the same
Oh,
phone.
that kind of reminds me. So the scene of her in the living room flipping through a magazine. Again, magazines still exist, but primarily in like doctors' waiting rooms. It
True.
feels like. Yep. Okay. So anything else before we move on?
No, I'm good.
Okay. So we can add to our new category, ATT, after the thing, because Fran does remind Maxwell in this episode. So that takes us to 6 out of 10 episodes.
Correct. Correct. Future fun.
Yes.
All right. So I almost got into this earlier, so I'll start there. In a future episode called A Decent Proposal, the family goes to Atlantic City so Maxwell can talk to Chevy Chase to try to convince him to do a new project with him. While there, Brighton has a fake ID and he plans to use it to sneak into some girly shows. And Fran confiscates it from him and rips it. And she asks him how much it costs, and it cost him way less than what it cost her for her fake ID, because hers was laminated and his wasn't.
Ah. Hence why it ripped.
Correct. I think I got the timing a little wrong. I think she grabs it and she asks about the price, and then when she finds out how much, then she realizes it's not laminated and rips it up. But either way, he doesn't get to sneak into the shows that are not age appropriate for him.
Mhm.
So there's that. Fran actually does. So we saw that Fran said that she says she's talking to a therapist. She does actually start seeing a therapist in just a few weeks. His name is Dr. Miller. She starts seeing him after the guy she was dating and started imagining a whole future with. And she describes him to her mother as, I've met the man I'm going to marry. She finds out that he's her cousin.
Yeah.
I mentioned that before, but
Yeah.
it's coming up.
Awkward.
Um,
Yeah.
yeah, he's an ear, nose, and throat guy. Fran actually spends most of her sessions with Dr. Miller talking about Maxwell. And there's actually a point where she's talking about her dad, and she's like, I want to get through this so we can get back to talking about Mr. Sheffield.
Mhm.
So that's point one, or I guess point two. Also, we saw here that Fran said to Maxwell, if you're going to touch me every time I'm depressed, that's really going to be my mood for a while. Her disappointment / depression caused by Maxwell not being willing to commit to her or advance their relationship leads to her becoming the muse for an angry singer. I think that's next season. In the episode No Muse is Good Muse. She actually ends up getting fired from her job, and I put job in air quotes, as a muse because she's happy when Maxwell says he misses her. Actually, I take it back, it's later this season. She gets fired because he starts paying attention to her. And the musician turns Val into her new muse. Finally, Maggie marries a relative of James Brolin. And when she and her fiance are about to get married, Barbara and James go to the Sheffield home, but they're there while Fran isn't, because Fran is in the hospital. So Fran then leaves the hospital to race home to meet Barbara, only to find that the house is empty because Maxwell arranged to have Barbara and everyone else visit her in the hospital.
Wow.
So poor Fran. That's the future of fun we have to look forward to.
Okay. So, time for episode rating then.
Yes.
As a reminder to our lovely listeners, we rate each episode 1 to 5 lipsticks, with 1 being the worst, 5 being the best. But it's kind of arbitrary. We can always adjust our scores later. So, this week, Debbie, you get to go first.
I hate it when it's my turn. I knew
Except
it was
when you don't.
except when I don't. This is one of those weeks where I don't want to have to go first, but I know I have to.
Mhm.
All in all, it's a good episode. It's solid. It's funny. I don't care for the plot point with the innocent bunny getting killed. I do, on the other hand, like that Fran feels horrible about it. And I do like that she tries to make her platform animal rights, even though we don't really see that. I don't like the idea of a lucky rabbit's foot. But again, like, I like how Fran reacted. I like how Maxwell kind of went out of his way to get her back on the horse. I'm just kind of like all mixed up. I don't like this episode as much as last week. It's not as bad as some of the other episodes earlier this season. I think I'm just going to give it a 3.5 because I can't make up my mind. How about you?
Okay. So with this episode, there are some other things I'll point out. It's just like, I am not really fond of how, like, obsessive Fran get, like, to the point of like moving from fan to stalkerish kind of tendencies, if that makes sense, with Barbara. Like threatening her sister to tell me, where she lives and no one gets hurt, stealing from her, like, was she really joking about the camcorder? All of that is just like, people don't do that. Don't do that to, like, if you're a fan of someone, don't invade their privacy. Um, you know, so I didn't really appreciate that. Um, Again, I've talked about this before, haven't in a while, but still, like, again, the show tends to like very much sexualize Brighton, and he's older now. So it's a little better than when he was like 10, but still, like, it's a very one-dimensional aspect to him, I guess. Like with his comment about why he went with them to the car show. Um, Again, Uh, I don't know. So I think it's also interesting that they decided to name the episode The Car Show when the car show itself was a very small aspect of the plot.
Mhm.
Um, so anyway, I'm just going to go with you and give it a 3.5. I don't know what to
Interesting.
say. Yeah.
It's interesting that there wasn't as much to do with the car. Like, we don't see that much of the car show, but it sort of did drive most of the other plots. Haha,
Haha, drive.
thank you. Thank you. I'm so funny, even when I don't mean to be. It's it's a fine episode. It's just fine. It's nothing to write home about.
Yeah.
I think is
The only
our
like the good
problem.
thing is like when Niles finally gets credit for having realized that how Mr. Sheffield feels about Fran. He's like, I've been hinting for 4 years.
Right. Actually, can I toss in one more piece of future fun for next week?
Sure.
I think it's next week that Niles finally finds out what the thing is.
Oh.
And when he finds out, he says, I could kick you in the seat of the pants.
Mm-hmm.
And then Max was like, what? And he's like, oh, I need to press the pleat in your pants, but never mind, go, blah, blah, blah. And then later in the scene, Maxwell does kick him in the butt. So in the seat of the pants. And he's like, bet you wish you had now. Anyway, sorry, you made me think of that. We've got some more interesting things coming our way.
Yep. Okay. Anything else you want to talk about this week?
I don't think so. How about you?
I do not.
All right. Well, that's all we have for you today. We hope you had a fine time with us as we revisited The Nanny. Join us next week when we'll be discussing episode 86, Hurricane Fran.
If you'd like to reach us on social media, you can find us on Twitter at Nanny Revisited. You can also send us email at afinetimenannyrevisited@gmail.com. Have a great week.